Hello everyone. Today we will talk about the First World War as well as the Russian Empire. So my dear children, in today's videos lectures, I shall be telling you about the events of First World War, and at the same time I shall be telling you very briefly about the great impact of First World War on Russia. So dear children, the First World War, which was happened in 1914, and it was happened between two European powers here. There was two European alliances, and in these two great European alliances, the First World War, which was happened in 1914. So dear children, here we see the Allied powers, and in these Allied powers, the United Kingdoms, the Britain, the United States, the China. So they are in the sides of Allied powers, and in Central powers we see the Germany, the Turkey, as well as the Japan. So dear children, here the war was fought outside of Europe, and at the same time it was fought in Europe also. And here, when the war was started, during that time in Russia, the peoples were greatly supporting the king Tsar Nicholas II, but the support was looking very thin when the king Tsar Nicholas II did not consult the Duma. So my dear children, at the initial period when the war was started, during that time the Russian peoples, they supported the king Tsar Nicholas II, but when the king Tsar Nicholas II did not consult or did not take the advice of this Duma or the consultative parliament, during that time the peoples, they were feeling very bad, and after feeling very bad, they did not support the king. At the initial period they supported the king, but here after the beginning of the First World War, the king who did not get the support from the peoples here, and during that time there were peoples who were having the anti-sentiments feelings about Germany, and that is the reasons when they were having a very anti-sentiments feelings towards Germany, they changed the name of Germany as Petrograd. And we see that the king's wife Serena Alexandras, who was from German origins, and in their court or in the palace we see a monk. His name is Rasputin, who is the bed advisor of Tsar Nicholas, and because of these two individuals, the autocratic systems was very unpopular in Russia. Why? Because the kings as well as the Tsarina Alexandras, who was hearing the words of the monk called Rasputin, and here the Rasputin was a very bad advisor. So here the king was acting on the advising of Rasputin. That is the reasons the peoples, they did not like the autocratic systems in Russia, because peoples were considering this Rasputin is a very bad advisor. So my dear children, already I have told you that at the initial period of the war, they liked the king, they supported the king, but when the king heard this monk called Rasputin, during that time they did not like the king here, and that is the reasons the king who lost its popularity, the king who lost the support of the peoples, and due to that the autocratic systems in Russia became very unpopular. So dear children, as we are talking about the First World War, which was happened in European country between the Central Power as well as the Axis power. So dear children, here we understand that it is a great war which really affected the whole nations here. And we see that while the First World War was going on, during that time, on the eastern front as well as on the western front of France, the armies were, or these war was very different. Why? Because we see that in the eastern part of France there were so many soldiers, but in the western part there is less number of soldiers. So here, when the soldiers were there more in eastern part of France, we understand that here the Russians' defeats was very sure here. So dear children, here when the defeats was seen for the Russians nations during that time, peoples were thinking very bad. Peoples were very shocked about the defeats of Russia. They were saying many things to king, or they were saying many things to Tsar Nicholas. They were demoralizing the situations. They were thinking very negative about the kings, the Tsar Nicholas. So dear children, here we see the Russian army who lost very badly against Germany as well as against Austria in 1914 as well as in 1916. So here two times the Russian army who lost the war. The first times they lost in 1914 and again they lost in 1916, and due to that the peoples were demoralizing the situations. They were thinking bad about the king. They were blaming the king. They were talking bad about the kings. They were considering Tsar Nicholas as the very weak ruler who is not able to control the situations. And during that time we see that by 1917 again the soldiers are increasing, and here it is around 7 million. So here the enemies who were increasing in number, and they were all around 7 million. 7 million armies were increasing. So in order to defeat the Russian army, and when these 7 million soldiers were moving forwards, the Russian nations during that time, the Russian army, what they did was, in order to defend these enemies, they badly destroyed the buildings, the land, and due to that, the 3 million refugees were seen in Russia. So it's a very bad situation. So dear children, here we understand that the Russia who is badly losing from its opponent, and when they are losing, so we can see 3 million refugees were found in Russia. So here what we see, in order to defend these casualties, which is all around 7 million, what this Russian army did was they destroyed the crops, the building, and when they destroyed the crops and buildings, it was all around 3 million refugees that was found in Russia. So my dear children, when such kind of bad situations happens in the nations, it really created a very painful situations in Russia. So when the Russia was badly defeated during that time, all the peoples, they discredited the government, and at the same time they blamed the Tsar Nicholas II. Why they blamed here? Because peoples, they began to demoralize the situations, and they said that it is the Tsar Nicholas II who is not at all doing anything good for the nations. They are discrediting the government. They are blaming the kings as well as the emperor. Why? Because Russia was having very bad defeating from the opponents because the opponents were great in number. So dear children, here when such kind of bad situations was happen in Russia, during that time the soldiers of Russia, they do not like to, or they did not like to have any kind of such war in the future, because the situations was very bad in Russia. Apart from that, my dear children, when this first world war happened in Russia, during that time we see it created a very bad situations for the Russian nations. How it created very bad situations, we see the industry was very badly affected here, because we see at the beginning of the 20th centuries in Russia, the industries were very few. So what they do is they used to depend upon other nations. Through the Baltic Sea, they used to have the transportations of goods from other countries, other nations. But after the World War, they did not get much supplies from other countries. They were getting through sea routes. But after the World War I, the supplies was reduced. And the second impact was the industrial goods was also disintegrated more. That means the industrial equipments, the industrial goods, it also began to have disintegrations. That means they did not get more supplies of industrial goods. And at the same time, the railway lines were broken down, the labor shortage was found, the small workshops were shut down, the food shortages was found, the riots was happened at bread shops. So this was the situations which was happening in Russia after the World War I. So dear children, here we see at the beginning of my videos lectures, I was telling you that when the First World War was begun, the Russian peoples were supporting the kings, Tsar Nicholas II. But when the king, who did not want to consult the consultative parliament during that time, they were having negative feelings towards the king, towards the emperor, and they did not support him. And we see a very painful situations in Russia during the First World War, because we see the strong opponents. We see the strong opponents from Germany, strong opponents from Austria. So they are very powerful. There were nearly 7 million casualties. There were 7 million soldiers who defeated the Russians army. And in order to defend the armies, they destroyed the building, they destroyed the crops, they destroyed the whole lands in the nations, and due to that it created very bad situations in Russia. So my dear children, when such kind of situations was happened, peoples they blamed the kings as well as the government here. And when this war was happened, it really created a very painful situations. Already I have explained to you, my dear children, that the industries were very few in Russia. Whatever industrial goods were getting from other nations, it was stopped completely. Railway lines broken down, labor shortages was seen, food shortages was seen, the workshops were completely shut down, the riots was happening in many places, and this was the situations in Russia during the First World War. And the First World War, it really created a very painful situations in Russian Empire. Thank you so much for listening to me.